It's time for On the Farm in Alabama, bringing farmers and agribusiness the latest news from Alabama Extension and the Auburn University College of Agriculture. Now here's your host, Alabama Extension Regional Agent, Eddie McGriff.
Good day. I'd like to welcome everybody today to On the Farm in Alabama, and today as my guest I have Dr. Steve Brown. He is the cotton specialist with Alabama Extension. And Steve, this hurricane or tropical depression that is in the Gulf, it actually could do us a favor because we need a little bit more rain to finish out the cotton crop and late season beans.
A lot of Alabama needs a very, very good rain. Y'all have probably been in better shape in this part of the state, but for example, in southwest Alabama, they've probably gone 9-10 weeks without any substantial rain. So we've got, and that's the last place I would expect an extended drought in the state. So there are mixed places that are in desperate need of rain, and if we got an inch, even 2 inches over 2 or 3 days, and then it fared off, that would be wonderful for us, for cotton, for peanuts, for soybeans as well. So I'm sure soybeans would benefit from another rain as well, but cotton crop on the whole would definitely benefit.
Well, speaking of rain and how some of the cotton could probably benefit from some rain, what would you think about when do we need to cut off that irrigation on our cotton? We don't have a lot of irrigation up here in North Alabama, but we do have some.
The normal rule of thumb is, the accepted rule of thumb has been, once we get, say 10%, probably not more than 20%, if we're in a spell of extended dry conditions, and that's the forecast, we might want to benefit one more time. However, if we're in a situation where we're seeing showers come through, every few days, then I might hold off. But for most of the state this year, I think I would go ahead and water even when I'm 10 or 20% open. So that's just to finish it off, to help to make what's in the top of the crop. I think I would go ahead and water. I've actually watched a farmer irrigate when it was 40 or 50% open in a very, very dry year. I was shocked that it didn't do anything. It was very open weather. The sun shined on it then, and the next day I looked at it the next day and I couldn't tell that he'd hurt the crop. So that's unusual, but I would probably cut it off at 10 or 20% open.
Well, as long as we're having those 90 to 100 degree days, a lot of sunshine, very dry, we're not going to get any boll rot or hard lock from an irrigation.
That's right, and these kind of temperatures, and as long as something front comes in and moves out, and then a day or so, we're not likely to see a lot of hard lock and boll rot from that. So that doesn't concern me here. If we move down south and we had a rain pattern, then yeah, I would be. But I just not overly concerned this year with boll rot and hard lock.
Yeah, usually around Labor Day we get a rain, and so I expect we'll get rain out of this system. The weather forecasts have us to get a ½ inch to an inch of rain, which actually we could use.
For sure, for sure.
Another question growers ask me is, what about a late application of PICS?
That's the most common PGR is Mepiquat Chloride in a multitude of names, and PICS was the traditional the first name. The research is pretty clear. It does not improve yield performance. It makes the cotton look pretty. It levels it off perhaps. It darkens it up. It's not an essential part, and especially in a dry year, I wouldn't be inclined to do it. But from a yield standpoint, no big benefit. Some might make the argument that, well, I want to have a little less switch in the top and maybe a little less growth in the top, and maybe that would help us there. I wouldn't argue against that, and the fact that PICS is so economical these days. If I was going over for a final stink bug application, yeah, I wouldn't argue against that. If it was just to make that application, I probably would not do that. And you may even, in a lot of situations, you might even knock more bolls off by going through the field. So I wouldn't be so motivated to do it. It's just not going to make more cotton.
Yeah. The other question is, we're right on that time period that when we get into late September, early October, we're going to be looking at defoliating and putting on boll openers. Can you give our growers any advice?
Well, the first thing is when are you going to make that harvest aid application? And there are multiple things that we do with our harvest aid products. Of course, we call them defoliants, where they remove leaves. Some do a better job with mature leaves versus juvenile or immature leaves. And then some are going to help us inhibit regrowth. And if we've had a situation where we've got a good fertility in the field and we get some warm conditions through the fall, we might see significant regrowth. So regrowth inhibition is also important. But the big thing that's been used for many, many years now is bowl opening to facilitate once over harvest. So knowing those factors and what needs to be done in a specific field, the timing of defoliation is going to be critical, and there's lots of ways to think about it. If you've got a crack bowl, a first position crack bowl at a certain node, and then you probably have up the plant 4 or 5 first position bowls are probably sufficiently mature to proceed. One of the ways I always check is take a pocket knife and try to cut through it, and just thinking about what are the last bowls I expect to harvest. Now, most of our fields are varied, so you got to pick a representative area to make that call, to make that first application. I guess the other thing I would say, and I think your growers are probably more tuned to this than others, is, hey, let's get in a hurry to get the crop out. I've seen some weather forecasts, some climate type forecasts that suggest we might have a wetter fall than normal, and getting the crop out on time is going to make us money. It's going to make us money from a yield standpoint and a quality standpoint. So if I had a big vacuum cleaner and I could drive across the state's cotton, I'd suck it all up, because in too many areas, and I would say your growers are not necessarily offenders here, but in further south, particularly where peanuts compete for labor, sometimes the crop takes a back seat and stays in the field too long. So let's get the crop out.
Well, up in North Alabama, I always tell our growers that by the middle of October, we need to have all our defoliants and bowl openers on, because what we do is we need heat units to open those bowls and knock those leaves off. If we keep waiting and waiting, we won't get that cotton open.
What is your average frost date up here, you think, roughly?
Well, it depends. If you're on the mountain, it's going to be a little bit earlier, but I'd say the third week of October is usually when we can expect that the risks are very high for frost.
And that is just an average, because we never know. I've seen further south not see a killing frost till Christmas, and I've seen it in the middle of October. So you got to be ready, and as the crop approaches maturity, hey, let's get with it and get it done.
Well, I see too many people worry about that 2 to 3% of the crop on the top of the cotton plant, and they're not worried about the 95. I worry about the 95 to 97% of the crop that's ready to harvest and is at risk, rather than worrying about 2 or 3% on the top.
Well said. I was in some cotton this morning that had little bitty bowls, maybe bowls like that in the top, and maybe they picked that cotton, maybe not, but waiting on that one and sacrificing the big ones down in the middle to the lower part of the canopy is a bad idea. So let's don't wait.
One bad weather event can knock a lot of cotton out and string it out, and then also hurt your grade. So one bad weather can make that 2 or 3% disappear pretty rapidly.
Absolutely. I talked to a grower last year at one of our grower meetings, and he actually, must have been a big size farmer, because he actually leased another picker to help get his crop out. And in some years with weather events coming, that's going to make you money to realize that, get that crop in the gin and get it done.
But you would think when people, I have some growers that harvest some cotton in January. You think that would be an incentive to get it out early, and I think it is probably for those growers. But the other question I have is, I usually like, unless you have very heavy growth where you need to get that bowl opener to the bowl, it has to physically hit the bowl. I like a 1-over application of a higher rate of a bowl application than 2 separate applications.
Yeah, a lot of defoliation booklets or recommendation booklets talk about the 2 application process. My overwhelming thought is I'm like you. I want to do it in 1 application, And that means, again, doing all the different things, removing leaves, inhibiting regrowth, and opening bolls. There are a few occasions when we don't do quite a good enough job and we have to touch it up, but I would rather do that when once over, just because of cost and time, than plan to make 2 applications. Now, I will admit that if you're committed to a 2 application program, you can do a lot of good, and your rate of extreme success is going to be very, very high. But again, I would rather do it once, and the level of success, if you pick the right products and the right mixtures and the right rates, you're going to be successful a large percentage of the time, and probably do good enough job to not affect grades in a negative way.
Well, I hope we have good harvest weather. I hope we get one more rain, and then I hope it turns off dry. Of course, those growers that have cattle and want to get their winter grazing up, they're probably wishing for more rain. So
Absolutely.
It depends on who you are. But I'll finish up with this is, of course, I look at the crop up in North Alabama, Northeast Alabama, but you're looking at the crop statewide. Give us a little overview of what the cotton crop looks like in Alabama.
Our growing regions are so diverse, it's hard to pull that together to say, hey, the crop is this. Again, I've heard your crop, and you go to Northeast Alabama, you go to the Tennessee Valley, the crop looks really good here.
It does.
Other parts of the state, they're suffering. Much of the southern 2/3 of the state needs a significant rainfall or rain from this event that's coming. The USDA has us at 902 pounds per acre on about 375,000 acres. It's hard to argue with that. My one-time hope was to see us closer to 950, and I suspect this part of the state will be well in advance of that.
Well, it all depends on harvest conditions.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah.
Other parts of the state are going to be struggling because, again, Southwest Alabama, uncharacteristic. Their cotton's punished. There's a lot of cotton that was late, but this extreme heat has pushed it forward, and there's no more room to put stuff on the plant. It's just done. So it's hard to give an overall average, but I can't argue with them at this point. I was hoping for better. Sometimes I'll drive in an area and my yield estimate goes down, and sometimes it goes up. So
Yeah, it all depends on where you're standing.
Right.
But always, we've got a good crop, and there's no doubt about that. But it's not what you make; it's what you put in the basket.
absolutely. It's a long way to the gin at this point.
Well, that's a kind of an outdated saying now, what you put in the basket, because we're
That's
putting I guess it's what you put in the
the
roll.
There you go. There you go.
Okay. I want to thank Steve for being with us today on the farm in Alabama. Everyone tuning in, thank you.